Tonight, Bryce Miller will make his major league debut in Oakland. We'll tell you how we think his night could go and answer some of your questions here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors, and happy Bryce Miller Day. It is Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon by scanning the QR code that's right above my head. The link, as well as our social accounts, is also in the description of this episode. And this episode is a half mailbag, half Bryce Miller preview. We'll get to your questions a little bit later on in the show. But first, Colby, what should fans know about the Mariners' newest starter making his major league debut tonight at the Oakland Coliseum?
He throws hard.
Yeah. Want to explain to the listeners real quick why you don't sound super excited about one of the Mariners' top pitching prospects making his debut tonight?
We've had this conversation 3 times in the last 10 minutes, mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously some technical issues we've been working through, but Miller throws a really good fastball, and that's basically 90% of his game right now. So, Miller, he's a tall, athletic kid, and it's fastball, slider, cutter, changeup. It's really more of 2 distinct sliders. One's more of a sweeper, one's more of a traditional slider. So, but a lot of different, pitch trackers will refer to one of those sliders as a cutter. So we'll see. I don't know exactly what Miller calls it. Doesn't really matter. They're 2 separate pitches. And Miller's off-speed stuff is really inconsistent right now. You never really know what type of slider you're going to get from him on a night-in, night-out basis, and that's really the pitch that he needs. The changeup, it's never been much of anything more than fringe average at best. So you really need the slider or the cutter if you're Miller to get through a lineup, 2.5, 3 times. But the fastball is legitimately good. It's probably the best pitch in the Mariners' entire system. It's right up there with, it's right up there with Luis Castillo's fastball, just a little bit more consistent velocity. It's 96 to 99, extra life at the top of the zone, but it plays plenty well in any quadrant of the zone. He spins it really well. It's kind of got some run to it. It's just a bowling ball of a pitch at 97, 98, 99 miles an hour. So if he ever has that going and one of his sliders or his cutter, he could be a really dangerous pitcher, particularly against right-handed heavy lineups. So we'll see what happens with him. It's not pinpoint command. He's not George Kirby out there, but he does in general throw enough strikes. Walks aren't going to be a big issue most nights. But again, it's really good stuff. It's more control over command right now. He's an athlete. He is, pretty much by far out of the 3 guys you maybe were considering calling up here in terms of your top pitching prospects, he's by far the most stretched out. He's got the most innings under his belt. He's the most experienced at the minor league level. He's a really good prospect. Kind of taking some steps back this year. Again, it's only been like 3-4 starts, but slider hasn't really popped like they were hoping, at least not that we've seen. And the changeup hasn't. The changeup is what it is. Forget about it. It's the fastball and the slider for him. So if you're trying to gauge, is this going to be more like George Kirby's debut season or Logan Gilbert's debut season? It's probably going to be a lot closer to Gilbert than it is Kirby.
On yesterday's episode, we talked a little bit about how this was the softest landing you could possibly give Miller to make his major league debut, because he's going up against the worst team in baseball and the worst atmosphere and venue in baseball. There's going to be little to no pressure whatsoever put on him by the home crowd, by this offense in general, though this offense isn't a walk in the park. Brent Rooker's off to a great start. 238 WRC plus, 353, 465, 779 is what he's slashing. Ryan Noda's off to a pretty good start in his major league career. Carlos Perez, Jesus Aguilar, Ramon Laureano, Shea Langoliers, and Connor Capel all have a WRC plus north of 100, which is above league average. So this is not going to be necessarily an easy lineup to eat through, but there are a lot of righties there. So what are your expectations for Miller heading into his first career start against this lineup?
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty fair to expect him to go 4 or 5 innings, maybe 6, depending on how the pitch count is. And I think I think this lineup is it's so right-handed heavy that if Miller has even a decent slider tonight, he should be able to keep his team in the game and go 4 or 5, give up 2 or 3 runs, and just kind of let the offense go to work against a really bad pitching staff. It'll be interesting to see where his velocity is at tonight. There's going to be a lot of adrenaline going, making his major league debut. And it'll also be interesting to see where his command and control is tonight, because as we know, you get a little tense, you tend to grip the baseball a little harder, and that's not good for your control or your command. So you never really know how nerves are going to play into a guy's major league debut. For some people like George Kirby, he goes out and he has an amazing debut, right? But for some guys like Logan Gilbert, he flashes, but he gives up 4 runs in 5 innings, and you're just kind of like, well, better things are to come. So we'll see what kind of debut Miller has tonight. But the lineup itself, despite the high WRC pluses, it's actually a pretty good matchup for Bryce Miller, just in terms of lineup quality, handedness, and then obviously, as you mentioned, the atmosphere or lack thereof. It'll be interesting to see how he handles all that.
Yeah, if anything, the fans there are probably rooting against the A's because of everything that's been going on with their prospective move to Las Vegas, which is incredibly unfortunate. Esteury Ruiz is another guy to keep an eye out for in this A's lineup. He's a guy that can make a lot of stuff happen on the base pass. RE11 stolen bases, a really quick dude that can give Miller some issues if he gets on base. So definitely don't want him to get aboard. And then, Rooker and Noda are the guys that they definitely, or that he will definitely try and need to avoid in this one as well. But if he can give you 5 innings and gives you a chance to win, then you got to feel pretty good about where he's at and where you're at before he makes his next start, which is the real test against the Houston Astros on Sunday. But for now, we got some questions from you guys. We got some questions via email. We got some questions via Twitter. We're going to answer those in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. So forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And this episode of Locked On Mariners is also brought to you by So Rare. Our new sponsor, So Rare, is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 Major League Baseball teams. And unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next level competitions and rewards like MLB Game Weeks. MLB Game Weeks happen twice weekly and span a 3 to 4 day cycle. And at the end of game weeks, So Rare MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards win a variety of rewards, which can include So Rare scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. Prizes may vary depending on the competition. Head to sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. So We weren't able to do a mailbag yesterday because we had a lot of Mariners news and notes to catch up on, but we're going to make up for that with a few by answering a few of your questions now. We got a few questions via email that have been sitting in there for the last week or so. So we're going to catch up on those first, and then we'll get into a few questions that we picked from our Twitter. All right, so this one, a little hard to read because it is very tiny on our screen here, but I will try my best. After reading Ken Rosenthal's article about Jared Kelenic in The Athletic, detailing how Kelenic asked and was allowed to reach out in the offseason on his own to experts outside the organization to both get his head right and fix his swing, does it bring up doubts about the hitting coach, conditioning coaches, and sports psychologists within the Mariners organization? As the Mariners now lead the American League in strikeouts and have shown significant declines in the consistency of once consistent offensive players, is Kelenic's recent success outside the organization proof that changes need to be made immediately at these coaching positions within? This comes from Charles. Colby, what do you think?
It sounds like Charles really wants to fire the hitting coach, but needs a justification. So he's reaching a little bit here. No, this isn't proof of anything except for the Mariners are willing to do whatever they need to do to make sure their players feel like they're being taken care of and feel like they're being heard. There's nothing wrong with players going outside of the org to get help. Every team in baseball does this. Every team allows this. So, and also I find the thing about like, oh, they lead the league in strikeouts. That's a little disingenuous because it's really been the last week that they've struggled with strikeouts. And when you look at their roster construction, they're going to be up there in strikeouts. Eugenio Suarez strikes out. Cal Raleigh strikes out. You look at Julio right now is striking out quite a bit. So no, I don't think this is an indication that the Mariners hitting coach sucks, which is essentially what the question is asking. So Charles, I get what you're asking. I get why you're asking it. It's fair. It's been really rough to watch this offense, particularly the last, 4 or 5 days. But no, it's not, because at the end of the day, the hitting coach really doesn't have all that much control. He doesn't have all that much power. At the end of the day, Eugenio Suarez needs to stop chasing sliders 15 feet out of the strike zone. So does Teoscar Hernandez. So yeah, it's not one of those things to me that is indicative of anything relating to the Mariners hitting coach. So yeah, look, at the very end of the day, right? If the Mariners fired their hitting coaches tomorrow, would Teoscar Hernandez strike out less? And would it be because they fired the hitting coaches? No.
Yeah, I think, hitting coaches in particular have more of an impact on younger players than veteran players who have a set approach that they've been working with for years and years, like Teoscar Hernandez. Ultimately, within the case of Teoscar specifically, that's up to Teoscar to figure it out. Now, as far as younger guys like Jared Kelenic and Taylor Trammell, et cetera, go, that some more of the responsibility does fall on the coaching staff because they can have a bigger influence on guys like that. But again, you're not going to change who Eugenio Suarez is. You're not going to change who Teoscar Hernandez is. You're not going to change really even who Ty France is at this point. And it's not like, all the guys that I mentioned either are having particular issues or things that stand out a ton right now, some negatives that stand out a ton right now. I just think, guys are slumping right now. It's the start of the season. Things like this happen. Guys that you expect to be good don't hit for inexplicable reasons and then start to turn things around over the course of a season. We see it year in and year out. It's not just the Mariners. This happens on every team. That's not to excuse the issues that have happened this year. I just don't think it's as simple of a fix as firing coaching staff, because there are some guys on this team that it doesn't matter what you say to them. It doesn't matter whose coaching staff has them under their wing. They're going to be who they are. And it's ultimately up to them to fix the issues that they have right now in their swings.
All coaches can do is make suggestions, right? Ultimately, it's the players who have to accept them. And if the player is established, they're less likely to accept them. But even the young guys, they all have their own private hitting coaches. So it's just a different game than it was 20 years ago. So no, I don't think firing the hitting coach is going to do anything. And no, I don't think that the Mariners are bad at teaching hitting because they had a rough last week of April. So no, we get into June, July at some point, you scapegoat or not, you kind of have to shock the system a little bit. Fine. But right now, no, I'm not buying the premise.
Yeah. Another thing to note as well is that Kelenic's not the only one that went outside of the organization this offseason. to seek help. Taylor Trammell went to Driveline. JP Crawford went to Driveline. Those things have been well documented. And so far, I mean, it's been one game for Trammell, but with Crawford, those tweaks that they've made have worked so far. So we'll see how that continues to go. But so far so good on that front. And hey, the Mariners don't have to let their players go outside the organization to get help. So I'm not saying that they deserve kudos for that, but it's good. It's good that they're at least not impeding that in any sort of way from players going out and seeking out help outside the organization. All right, next question comes from John, who says, Ty and Colby, since listening to your show, I don't ever remember listening and hearing you talk about the strike zone and using electronics to help out the umpires. For me, and I am sure many other fans as well, we are fed up with home plate umpires helping decide close games. Besides having a million base runners stranded on base, it is the most frustrating part of baseball. All I hear about is the pitch clock and the shift rule changes. We have the tech to do it. Why didn't things change? Please give me your take on it all. John Patrick. All right, John. So I'm all in favor of a automatic strike zone as well, or an automated strike zone rather as well. I know there's some people out there that are like, it's just part of the game. The human error is part of the game, et cetera, et cetera. I don't care about that. I don't. I think that's stupid, frankly. I want balls and strikes to be called right and fairly and correctly, because a lot of the times it is lopsided. It is a lopsided thing that does heavily favor one team or the other over the course of a game. So it doesn't balance out the way that people like to pose it, right? Where, human error is part of it. And, for as many bad calls as one team will get, the other team will get the same over the course of that doesn't happen. That's not correct. And it impacts a lot of games in a very significant way. You can just look at the MLB umpire scorecards bot on Twitter, and you can see the evidence of that. So, yeah, I think it's something that absolutely needs to be implemented and something that needs to be addressed over the next couple of years. The last thing that I remember reading was that they were going to have that discussion before the end of the CBA, the current CBA. And this is something that they have tested out at other levels of the sport. So they have the data for it. They have the infrastructure for it. So I think it's something that does desperately need to be put in place in Major League Baseball, because the umpiring in general is also just getting worse by the day.
Yeah. I think before we see a full electronic strike zone, I think what we're going to see is a challenge system. They're testing this out in AAA on the weekends, actually. And essentially the way that they are doing this, as far as I'm aware, is that you get one challenge per at-bat. So you can't challenge every single pitch that the umpire calls. You get one challenge per at-bat, and the only people who can challenge are the pitcher, the catcher, or the hitter. So the manager can't look at the screen and challenge it. No, it has to happen right away. And I think we're going to see that implemented in Major League Baseball before we get to a full, electronic strike zone. But I do think that's coming eventually. It's just you can't get in the way of technology, and the harder you try to hold back, the more you're getting lapped by other leagues who are embracing this technology. So, is the technology going to be 100% accurate? No. Is there going to be a glitch, or is it going to mess up sometimes? Sure. But Major League average right now is about 91% correct calls, 92% correct calls on balls and strikes. Why would you not want that to be 98, 99, 99.5? Like just do it. Forget about the whole human element thing. The players are the human element.
Yes.
Nobody goes to Major League Baseball games to watch Angel Hernandez throw up on himself behind the plate, or Laz Diaz make the entire game about him, right? Nobody's going to the games for that. They're going to watch Mike Trout. They're going to watch Julio. Let those guys be the story, not your horrifically bad umpires. And, it's a bummer that guys like, Pat Holberg, I think is the best umpire in baseball. Yeah. He's at like 96% or something like that. It's a bummer that he just gets lumped in with all these horrible umpires, but I don't care. It's about the players, and it's about the fans. It's not about the umpires.
And at the end of the day, umpires are still going to have jobs, right? They're still going to
Oh, you're
need
still going to
someone
need a guy
down.
behind home plate. Yeah,
There's someone down on
absolutely.
home plate that, I guess he'll have an earpiece or
Yeah.
whatever that,
He'll
tells
make
him
the
strike or
calls.
ball.
Yep.
He'll make the
Check
call.
swings, fair foul, safe out at home.
Yeah,
Like,
there's going to be base umpires still. You need guys to make safe and out calls, all that stuff. So there's still going to be a
yeah.
place in baseball for umpires. But as far as the strike zone goes, it needs to be automated. It has to, because it
Yeah.
is severely swinging games into the direction of one team or the other. That's a problem. It's a real problem, and it's taking ultimately the skill, the talent out of the game a little bit. It's sapping the game of that. And for a casual baseball fan, why would you want to watch that? Why would that um why would that inspire you to go watch a Major League Baseball game right now if you know that
Yeah.
most of these calls are going to be botched, unless you got Pat Hoberg behind the plate. And why would you want to watch a product like that allows for the umpire to take so much control over a game? Because it can change the absolute face of an at bat of a game. Doesn't matter. So that does need to be fixed by Major League Baseball as soon as possible. All right, we got more questions coming up here in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder: this episode of Locked On Mariners. Let me see, what do we got coming up here? Yes, BetterHelp. Let's tell you folks about BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Therapy can be helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It can empower you to be the best version of yourself. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you don't feel that your match is suitable for you, no worries. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonmlb today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonmlb. And we are back to the Locked On Mariners podcast. By the way, tonight you can catch the Mariners and A's game from Oakland on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. So check it out. Now let's get back into these questions. This one comes from Luke, who says, "Hey guys, everyday Spotify listener and non-tweeter here. I listened to your episode about the Mariners' options to deal with the fallout of Robbie Ray's surgery. The trade options seem intriguing. However, the Mariners' pitching needs don't exist in a vacuum. There are surely other teams that will be looking to upgrade their rotations this summer as well. This leads me to two questions. First, who will the Mariners' biggest competition be in trying to land these quality rotation guys? Second, what do you think Jerry and crew will do to make sure the Mariners have the most attractive trade offer? Go M's." Luke. So this is a boring answer. It's still so early to tell you who the Mariners' competition is. We don't even know if the Mariners are going to actually be looking to add at the deadline. I mean, right now they're 4 games under 500. Maybe that does continue. Maybe we were wrong this offseason. The Mariners are just bad, right? So that can happen. We don't know what teams are going to be competing, contending, looking to add and get better at the trade deadline. And we don't know, which teams are actually going to be looking for starters. We don't know if injuries are going to strike, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, though, I would say, looking at the Astros have a lot of homegrown starting pitching talent, but they just lost Jose Urquidy. They just lost Luis Garcia. Maybe that's a team that looks to upgrade in its rotation. And their farm system is it's still not great, but it is getting better. And so they do have some pieces that they could offer to potentially land a starting pitcher at the deadline. Colby, I'll ask you the second, or I'll let you answer the second part of this question though. What could the Mariners offer? What do the Mariners have to offer to land a starting pitcher that, I mean, we had this conversation back on Friday's show about Robbie Ray and who you should replace Robbie Ray with. I think that you need someone that's at least close to Ray's potential, or it's really not worth addressing it. So what's it going to take to land that guy? What do the Mariners have to offer to land someone like that?
Yeah, a lot of factors here. Like how much money is the player owed, what's left on the contract, how many years of club control am I getting. But when you look at what the Mariners have to offer at the minor league level, they're in luck. It's pitching, which is the number one commodity teams look for at the deadline. So they have plenty of pitching. Would you like to hold on to Brian Wu and Emerson Hancock? Yeah, but would you be willing to trade one of them for, a year and a half of a mid-rotation starter? Also, probably, yeah, depending on where you are at the standings. So they have plenty of pitching. They also have some, pretty interesting guys. They're probably not headliners, but maybe you can package together a group of like Jonathan Clase, Tyler Locklear, and Cade Marlowe, and maybe you can kind of go bulk and go get Eduardo Rodriguez or Lance Lynn or one of those guys we talked about. Maybe you probably don't need to pay that much for Lynn, but you know what I mean? Like, so they can kind of do one of each. What they really can't do, or what they probably really shouldn't do, is go offer up Miller, Young, and Ford for a pitcher. I don't think you can afford to do that this year. I also don't know that there's going to be a guy out there that's worth doing that for. And that's part of what Ty was saying. We just don't even know who's really available. So, I mean, like the Cardinals, they're pretty bad right now and they might need pitching, but what if they stay bad? And then all of a sudden Jordan Montgomery's available and Jack Flaherty's available. And like, are those guys interesting? Yeah, kind of. So I think when you're looking at what they have to trade, they have enough. To just answer the question, they have enough, and then the price of that pitcher comes down to the individual pitcher you're trying to acquire. But yeah, most teams, they're going to ask about Wu and Miller and Hancock, and do they have other guys to offer instead of those guys? Yeah, they do, but there's a pretty steep cliff between those three and what's coming up after that. So.
Right.
We'll see, but yeah, they have enough to pretty much go out and get anybody except for, I mean, like in theory, could they go for another Luis Castillo if he became available? Yeah, they could. Does it make a lot of sense to go do that? That's kind of a debate for, July.
It feels like a massive luxury, but again, let's say that they go on a huge win streak and suddenly they're leading the division by 7 games, and it seems like,
Sure.
Again, this is a very outlandish, dream here. But again, if they were to do that, if it gets to a point where you're really serious about trying to win the World Series, then yeah, you do that if it makes sense.
Yeah, like you're going to the playoffs, and you have a really good shot of winning the division, and therefore the World Series. Like that, then it might make sense to go leverage Miller and Ford and Young, and go get that guy. Yeah.
All right, we got Twitter questions now. This one, if it'll come up, comes from Christian. Directed more towards Ty, but for both of you anyway, what game did you leave early that you regretted the most after seeing the end result? Any live professional sporting event? What happened on Sunday? The game that I left on Sunday. Yeah, that's the answer. Because that's the only time that I've ever left a game early where they come back and won, where they actually done it. That isn't something that I've made a habit out of, though. I've only done that a handful of times. Usually if I left a game early, it was when I was a kid, and because we needed to take a ferry back home. We lived like an hour and a half away from Seattle, so like if my parents wanted to beat the traffic, then yeah, but other than that, I haven't typically left games early except for Sunday, unfortunately. So yeah,
I have never left a sporting event early. That's a fact.
Okay, so there you go.
Some of us care more.
Daisy and the Dingo asks, the Mariners currently ranked 29th in K percentage and 22nd in base on balls to K ratio. Last year, they were 14th and 6th, respectively. Do you think this will regress back to the mean, or has their lineup become too prone to the strikeout? I mean, that goes back to the question that we had about the hitting coach and all that stuff, that you have guys that are just going to strike out. You are going to be near the top of the league in strikeouts because Julio strikes out, Kelnick strikes out, Eugenio strikes out, Teoscar strikes out. All these guys, they strike out. Now, some guys on the team are striking out a lot more than their career average, and so that's going to regress a bit. Like Colton Wong is striking out like 8% above his career average or something crazy like that. So is JP Crawford right now. But there's also guys that are walking a lot more, or a lot more and a lot less than their career averages as well. So like Teoscar's on the low end, right? He's not going to walk 1.6% of the time all year. I
God,
don't
I
think that's
hope
going to
not.
happen. I mean, his career average is like 7.6, which is
Yeah.
fine. Which that's fine.
It's a little
for
bit
him.
below average, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine for him. It's fine for a hitter like him. And then there's like JP who's running like a 17% walk rate right now. Like that's going to go down a little bit as well. So I think on some of those fronts, yeah, that's going to regress back to the mean. But also, this is just kind of the nature of the roster that you built, that you are going to have a lot of guys that are boom or bust bats.
Sure. I mean, let's not ignore how big those numbers can be skewed when you strike out 35 times in a 2-game stretch. Right. So like, yeah, in the course of a regular season, that type of stretch isn't going to hurt you too bad. But when we're talking about 25 games, like that can tip the scale pretty seriously. But yeah, like Ty said, there are guys on this roster who are just going to strike out, and that's part of the trade-off you make for the power that they generate. So the guys who don't strike out and have tremendous power, they're going to the Hall of Fame. Like they're, MVP candidates, and even Mike Trout strikes out a little bit here. So I mean, like, I'm not worried about it. It'll all even out eventually. And yeah, the Mariners are going to walk more. And you even see guys like Jared Kelenic, the K percentage is coming down, just because, first 2 weeks he had an 0 for 10 where he struck out like 6 times. Okay.
Yeah.
Colton Wong
Teo just struck out like 9 times in 10 at bats. Like,
yeah. Colton Wong's strikeout number is going down. He's putting the ball in play more. So yeah, no, I don't think they're going to be the worst strikeout team in Major League Baseball. I think they're probably going to land somewhere in the middle. And then the walks, we'll see. Last year it was certainly helped that they had Carlos Santana in the middle of the year.
That's true. That's a good point. All right, last question here comes from Peter. Which player's slow start are you least concerned about, and which player in general are you most concerned about for the rest of 2023? So for me, least concerned, Julio. It's Julio. Julio's going to figure it out. Unless he gives me a reason to believe otherwise, Julio's going to figure it out. Most concerned, probably Colton Wong. He's starting to get some hits now. He's starting to collect some hits over the last couple of days. I think he had 2 on Sunday. So the balls, the hits are starting to fall for him a little bit. The problem is his defense has been not good. Had some pretty big mental gaffes on the defensive end and on the base pass. He almost got doubled up at first base on a routine fly ball to left field on Sunday as well. Like he does seem a little like he's in his head or absent-minded or something. I don't think that's going to last long term, but it is fairly concerning because he was supposed to be such a big part of this thing, and it just hasn't panned out so far. And it's not going to be, there's going to be options at the trade deadline, but it's not going to be particularly easy to upgrade second base if Wong is just bad. So what's your answer?
First of all, I'll trade for Adam Frazier. Boom. Looking for this.
The slap
yeah. Slapped in America on the 19-9 Baltimore Orioles, because why not? Why not?
I thought the Orioles were going to be good, honestly.
I thought they were going to be fine. Like, I thought they were going to win 84 games, which I still kind of think they will, but I thought they would be roughly as good as they were last year, despite not adding anybody of significance. Anyways, that's not what we're talking about here. Who am I least concerned with? Probably Julio, but just to be different, I'll say Teoscar. Not really concerned about that whatsoever. We've already seen Teo put together a couple weeks of really good offensive production, and now just kind of a rough 3 days, but stuff happens. Most concerned with nobody. This team's running the table. I don't know. I'm really not all that concerned with anybody per se. Like, obviously Tommy La Stella, but who isn't? I guess.
Yeah, I think your concern has to be more so with someone that is like could feasibly be on the team for the whole year. Yeah.
I guess I would say I'm a little no, I'm not really, but just to pick like Gino's power. Where's the power? Eugenio. We don't pay you to hit singles, right? If you're gonna hit 260, you better be hitting at least 20 home runs. And right now he's not on pace to do even that. So a little concerned about that. Ty Francis looks so bad the last 10 days. at some point you trust the back of the baseball card, but it's not like we haven't seen France struggle for months on end before. Usually it's injury related, but we've still seen it. So, yeah, I guess if I have to pick one player that I'm a little bit concerned about, maybe AJ Pollock. The interesting thing about Pollock is that the batted ball data, it's fine. You look at his numbers on Statcast. What really seems to change is the launch angle is too high. A lot of a lot of fly balls that are going straight up instead of out. So yeah, there's a few guys here and there, but for the most part, I'm not that concerned because we got 135 odd games to go. This is a really good question for like 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, Pollock is really interesting because, like you said, the batted ball data is actually not bad. And on top of that, does he still not have a hit against a lefty?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's not gonna last long. Like you can't convince me that AJ Pollock is suddenly he just can't hit lefties. Like when that was like his one strength when he did struggle last year, when he did regress last year, like he still was really good against lefties. So now you're telling me that's just gone, right?
Yeah.
I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I don't. I think Pollock's going to be a lot better than than what the results have shown so far. So I'm not too concerned about him. He's certainly not at the top of the list. Colton Wong for me is at the top of the list because he was such an important piece to your offseason. And that's ultimately why he ends up there. But seems like he's starting to turn things around a little bit. So hopefully that's a sign of what's to come here. And hopefully you can have a strong month of May, or else, after the month of May, I think we have enough of a sample size to start having conversations about, the roster. And so if it's another rough month for Wong, then the Mariners have a problem, like a legitimate problem that needs to be solved sooner rather than later. So
yeah. And like you said, he's already slowly trending in the right direction. He just has to continue to do it.
Yeah.
So there's no magic number. Like Wong has to be hitting 230 by the end of May. Like it's just about the at bats. Is he, putting the ball in play hard? Is he, running into some bad luck? Yada yada. But yeah, to me, Memorial Day is around the time where I could start to say, okay, this might not be working. You might consider a change here. So we're about a month away from that.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, and thank you all for your questions. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dan Gonzalez. It's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well over at Locked On Mariners. That's one word, Locked On Mariners. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. On tomorrow's show, we'll recap Bryce Miller's major league debut. Hopefully it goes well. But for now, have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.